Before watching Arcane, many thoughts ran through my mind just as I'm sure they did with most. Despite how special the trailers looked, apprehension kept creeping into my mind as it was a video game adaptation, which notoriously ends in failure. On top of that, many still don't treat animation as an equal to live action, something I made an entire video about. So it's fair to say this show had a lot going against it. But none of that matters, because Arcane instantly erased all of those doubts and is even better now through multiple watches. The show is gorgeous, thrilling and well written. By the end of every episode, I still wonder, how is it actually this good? There have been a rare few who have consistently left me dumbstruck episode to episode, and Arcane is now one of them. It's spectacular. First impressions matter, which is more than evident in Arcane's opening scene. There is no dialogue, just brilliant cinematic arrangement and a haunting score that all mix to create an eerie atmosphere baked with emotional undertones. Plenty is conveyed about our two main characters, such as Vi being someone who wants to effect change through fighting, an idea suggested by the clenching of her fists and fixation on the upside. Whereas Powder, the entire sequence is clutching onto her sister, implying she's all she has left and can't bear to be alone from her. Furthermore, the crux of this story is front and center, contrast and divides, what we know as duality. The writers couldn't make it any clearer by opening the first episode with a war, which is an idea associated with two or more opposing forces colliding. And then to reaffirm the idea before the theme song plays, we see Vi look over Vanda's shoulder towards the beautiful upside, whilst they retreat to a misty unknown place that is underground. Only the very best shows can do all of this, communicate important thematic information within minutes without a single word. As a result, Arcane demands respect instantly. You must pay attention as it has planted numerous little details. More importantly, as the show goes on, we see the principal idea of division continue to be in everything. The main characters end up on opposite sides. When the council is split on how magic should be treated, we see those concerns separated into good and bad. Significantly, Jace is associated with the former, whilst Powder is linked to the latter, as she cannot control it. Even what can be called the rip-off drug alternative has its positives and negatives. But at the center of it all, the reason for such strong divides is the two separate civilizations, the Upside and the Undercity. However, while contrast is integral to the narrative, helping form many of the identities in the story, it is also contradicted by the three-dimensional characters.
I tried, okay? You don't get it. You're older, you're bigger. It isn't fair.
So stick with us. Take a punch or two.
Many might say Jinx is a rip-off of Harley Quinn, and judging by the pre-Arcane content, I would have been the first aboard that sentiment. But now, I'll definitely be the last, because this is a far more fleshed out and flawed character than what Harley has ever been on screen. And I'm not sorry for saying that. Beginning the story as Powder, she is a frail young girl that just doesn't fit in, and cannot live up to the large shadow cast by her sister. She's different from Vi and the crew. She's less comfortable with people, preferring to be around things, such as her gimmicky traps and gadgets. This is reinforced in the opening episode. She is not as confident nor as capable as the others who seemingly excel at similar things. This is all great storytelling to convey she is the misfit of misfits. These factors, amongst others, such as her childhood trauma, feed into her separation anxiety, and the show portrays that aspect flawlessly. Admittedly, I've never seen the illness, but with how it's portrayed in the show, it's heart-wrenching and mentally exhausting. Impressively, when the Act 1 finale came around, all these micro details and moving pieces came out in one hell of a performance. 16-year-old Mia Sinclair Jenness voiced young Powder. Note though, she was casted at the age of 10, so God knows how old she was when she was giving some of the best performances we've seen from voice acting in some time. The voice acting is nothing short of remarkable. This girl puts out all the stops, going from pure ecstasy,
My monkey bomb finally worked!
to emotional denial,
Oh, they wanted to help. I only wanted to help. I only wanted to help.
I told you to stay.
To horrid anguish.
I need you, please.
To desperation. To then volatile anger.
She is not my sister anymore.
That one glorious masterclass of a scene landed so perfectly because of the brilliant range, depth and maturity of the young girl voicing Powder. Nevertheless, her character is left broken, dismantled and alone, allowing Silco to pick up the pieces and rearrange them to create Jinx.
You're lost, take your trust. That's me. That's so sick. I'm a fraud, call me a liar. A true psycho.
This new persona is deeply tragic, as Powder has evolved, given into her flaws. The demons of her past have tormented her into an unhinged state of mind. The byproduct of successfully conveying all of this means that whenever she makes a cliché, rash decision seen many times in storytelling, we can actually believe in it instead of roll our eyes at it. However, more interesting in the story though, is that at the end of it all for Jinx, there was an unexpected person who ends up supporting her, even at the cost of something he thought he wanted his whole entire life, and that was the same person who helped mold her. Silco is an incredible character. The word nuanced is meant for him. Initially he comes across as the villain, but through more screen time we learn he is someone who just wants what is best for his people, something he is capable of achieving since he is a master strategist with an unwavering eye on a grand vision. In fact, highlighting his genius is this one move where he springboards himself into a position of influence. I'm happy that other fans have also taken note of this scene. When he kills Grayson, he sends a message to the untouchable upside that they can be reached, but also creates a vacant position to be filled, one that he can use to leverage some influence. By doing this, he effectively switches roles with his former friend. He is now the face of the world below and has his own person on the inside. But he becomes more like Vander than he would have liked. While he does become a terrorist, there are far more layers to him, as he becomes a father to Powder, just as Vander was for Vi. The word villain starts to become too harsh, but more appropriately, that's how the world wants us to view everything, in two shades. Yet characters like Silco blur the lines, a unique example of how the theme of duality is also challenged in the story. There isn't necessarily a good and bad, just a human character with very deep flaws. Another fundamental person in this character-driven story that can't go without analysis is Vi. She goes on to embrace Vander's role and wants to protect her family, yet ends up losing them all. She tries again and again to believe Powder still exists, but after the dinner party scene, there's no chance, at least not for some time. However, a big question should be asked here. Does Vi just amplify Jinx further? Does she push her over the edge? Initially, no, right? She does pretty much everything you'd expect a typically good character to do. She doesn't knowingly antagonize her sister. However, she does end up forcing her to split herself, to battle herself, which makes her illness far worse. In a desperate attempt to help Powder, she creates chaos and further unrest in her mind. The show portrays this brilliantly by having Jinx feel overwhelmed as her two identities fight each other. The mistake Vi made is one almost every character with good intentions could make. She failed to consider that it had been some time since she last saw her sister, enough time for her to become a new person. Instead of accepting Jinx for who she now was, instead of possibly taking the weight off her shoulders, she makes Jinx tear herself apart. That is a refreshing level of maturity in the writing, that all types of personality changes, even ones we may consider bad, need to be acknowledged. All this goes to show how much happens and passes in this story. Nothing in the show illustrates that though better than the confrontation between Jinx and Echo. This is actually one of the best fight scenes to ever appear on TV. It only lasts a few minutes, but it consists of nail-biting tension that reaches a huge crescendo once the fists are flying. And oh boy does it come with gorgeous presentation. It feels cinematic. As Jinx shoots, Echo appears out of the illuminating light for a one-on-one duel. This is beautiful composition. It's also at this moment, as they stand off against each other, with the diegetic music of Echo's watch ticking in sync with the background hip-hop melody, that I realized this battle was set up from the beginning. When they were kids, they were the gadget pros, and so this time as they draw their weapons, it fittingly transitions to a few minutes of their younger selves, until a sharp cut brings us to the visceral beatdown of reality. This artistic choice was risky, but it pays off in spades as it visualizes that so much has happened. A friend is now foe. The meticulously planned fight sequence is chef's kiss. It has it all, and shockingly, we wouldn't have got it this way if it weren't for the creative innovation of the studio creating this show. The transition to the younger selves was not originally planned. This brings me nicely to what may be the greatest success story of Arcane. Being a relatively unknown French studio, Riot Games took a huge gamble by handing them the responsibility to bring this story to life. And it didn't go without its wobbles. Arcane nearly collapsed as the studio intervention put the project on hold. However, the passion of certain creatives and continued successful spin-off work by Fortiche reopened the opportunity to finish off what they started. And this time, they made sure to give it their absolute soul. The studio gifted the show their unique art style, a blend of 2D and 3D that is topped with a paintbrush finish. A look that instantly gives Arcane a uniqueness that is refreshing. Blood, sweat and tears were also given to the animation, which doesn't only focus on the big action set pieces, as every minute of Arcane is rigged with so much movement in order to evoke personality. For example, when looking at Jinx, you'll notice plenty of frantic and loose mannerisms, conveying her chaotic mind and carefree attitude towards consequences. Oh, and remember, that's just one character. They did this for every single person and thing on the screen. I can't imagine how long and strenuous it must have been to plan and create all these micro details, especially because it was all handcrafted, no motion capture. Accordingly, animators even became the characters themselves as they needed to record references for scenes. They went above and beyond and it pays off. The acting of these animated characters feel real even though it's not. Regardless though, in all my excitement I have forgotten to give acknowledgement to the other characters in this story, which is an entire roster given the same level of writing as the leads. For example, the dynamic between Mel and Jace is fascinating. She's someone who first comes across as a vindictive, power-hungry counselor, willing to bend the rules in order to help herself. However, through her time with Jace, we see that's not the case, or at least entirely. He is introduced as a contrast, an innocent pure soul, the opposite first impression of Mel, but through their time together we see darker elements of him and brighter ones of her. As a result, Jace, who seemed one note, becomes multi-dimensional. He rises up the ranks, rolls up his sleeves and gets in bed with corrupt counselors in order for his future plans. And although he may not like it, he does have a clear aptitude for the sleazy part of the game, which nicely foreshadows his ability to turn the wheels behind the scenes. It all goes to show that every person is more than what they look like. You can't figure everything about them through the first impression. Either way, when speaking about Jace, you cannot leave out his best friend. Victor quickly has become a fan favourite, and it's clear why. He's a breath of fresh air, going against all conventional tropes he should fall into. Unlike many other crippled geniuses who may feel like they're having the spotlight stolen from them, he doesn't become jealous or corrupted by his condition. He is always aware of the limitations and consequences, wanting to do what is right and better for the world, even if it means he will die. He is a true underdog that earns our admiration for his values and for how much he has already achieved. He came from the depths of this world, physically and economically disadvantaged, but forced his way into upper society through his genius mind. On another note, it's about time I actually mention how well realized and alive the world of Arcane feels. From the get-go, we're shown the upside is clean, possesses state-of-the-art tech, and has beautiful architecture. The brushstroke finishes are easier to see in the city, which amplifies a sense of artistry and beauty. On the other hand, the first sight of the Undercity is that it's weathered, drug-ridden, and dirty. Heck, the way the show first decides to get us there is through literal junk. Furthermore, the immersion and believability of the world are accompanied by careful sound design. When the group parkour their way towards a building, it feels real because you can hear the sounds of metal clanging and the reverberations of it when they collide. It's great sound mixing. Even if it is a finger brushing against the glass, we can hear it. These little details are little, but grouped together become huge in crafting a unique experience, one that goes from being immersive to tangible. The amazing audio is also channeled to the music. Riot Games wanted to feature mini music videos in almost every episode. The genre of choice was often pop and rock, a sound commonly associated with the gaming industry, and they sometimes cleverly mixed it into scenes as diegetic music. However, notice I said sometimes, as it didn't always have the intended effect. It could feel quite jarring, as one moment you have an emotionally constructed scene that then breaks down into a contrived musical set piece that pulls you out of the experience. For me, they should have kept those scenes to a minimum, so that the fantastic original soundtrack can shine through more often, leaving these unique set pieces to be more special and memorable. But despite that little wobble, and it's little, Arcane is near perfect. It feels historic, a landmark moment for animation as it doesn't falter to its live-action competition. Instead, it rose above them, continuing the growing success of the art form. The story features an array of fleshed out characters and themes that are applied with a sharp focus onto every detail. There is not a moment in this story that is boring or looks sloppy. Arcane is just as spectacular now as it was when it released, if not even better.